e4, e5, mirror image. Knight f3, hitting the pawn. Knight to c6, defending. Knight c3, we're sliding into four knights territory. Black usually copies with knight to f6, the classical move, or breaks the mold with bishop c5. Knight f6, the four knights game. Symmetrical, polite, and quietly waiting for someone to throw the first punch. And there it is, a 4. Not the main line, not even in the neighborhood of the main line. Grischuk grabs queenside space and basically dares Black to do something about the center. This is a fight invitation. There's the strike, d5. Black smashes the center open and the symmetry is gone. This is now a real game. Bishop to b5, leaning on the knight that holds d5 together. Knight takes e4. Black snatches the pawn and the whole position cracks wide open. Knight takes e5. Punch, counterpunch. Both sides swinging in the center. Queen to g5, jumping out to eye the knight on e5 and sniff around g2. A little ambitious. There are loose pieces flying everywhere here, and this isn't quite the cleanest way to handle it. Knight takes c6, breaking up Black's coordination before any combination gets off the ground. Queen snatches g2, and now mate on f2 is suddenly in the air. The king hasn't castled, and the queen smells blood. Rook to f1, plugging the hole. Mate threat handled. A 6, shoving the bishop and asking it where it wants to die. Knight takes d5 instead. Grischuk ignores the bishop entirely and just grabs the pawn in the center. He's playing for chaos. A takes b5, collecting the bishop. Knight takes c7. Check. And it forks the king and the rook in the corner. Black can't save both. King to d7, and the rook on 8 is living its final moment. Knight gobbles the rook. White's up in exchange. But look at where that knight is. Parked in the corner on an 8, miles from civilization. B times c6, taking back. 45 seconds spent on a recapture. Already a sign that Black isn't loving life here. Whoa, White's kingside is shattered. Look at this. The f-pawn on f2 and the h-pawn on h2 are completely isolated. No neighbors. A gaping hole where the g-pawn used to be. That's 3 pawn islands for White versus a tidy 2 for Black. Those split White pawns are long-term targets. They can't defend each other. White needs to push that a-pawn and create queenside play fast. See that? The skeleton's already telling you who's got the cleaner structure here. Knight b6 with check. And Grischuk burned 103 seconds to play this. Nearly 2 minutes. And it's a blunder. The corner knight needed to escape, but simply taking on b5 kept everything tidy. This check just invites the king forward and hands the advantage back. King to c7, kicking the knight. Knight takes c8, grabbing the bishop before it gets trapped in the corner itself. Bishop c5, developing with an angry stare at f2. It's aggressive, but the check on b4 first packed a much bigger punch. This lets White consolidate. d4, hitting the bishop and slamming the door on the f2 ideas. Rook to e8, swinging onto the e-file, where White's king is sitting exposed. Bishop e3. And this is a real mistake. The queen belonged on e2, shielding the king. Now there's a check that flips this entire game upside down. Bishop b4, check. Suddenly White's king is caught right in the open. c3, blocking with the pawn. But this is the wrong defense. The king simply had to step to e2. Watch what happens now. Knight takes c3! There it is! The pawn shield evaporates. The queen on d1 is under fire, and White's king is standing naked in the middle of the board. Brilliant, fearless, and completely winning. Queen to d3, scrambling to glue the position back together. Knight takes a4 with check. And Paulina lets the whole thing slip through her fingers. The rook crash on e3 was absolutely crushing. This check just trades all the fire away for a single pawn. King to e2. And just like that, the storm is gone. And it's dead equal again. King takes c8, finally collecting that stranded knight. But it's a blunder. The king strolls right into a check that wins on the spot. Hold on, rewind one move, because the queen check was screaming to be played here. Queen to g4, check. And now, White is forced into f3 to block. But that's exactly the point. It opens the door, because Black would just grab the knight, queen takes c8, winning the whole piece for free. That's what should have happened. Anyway, back to reality. Queen f5, check. Everything changes again. Rook to e6, throwing itself in front of the check. Rook to g1, and White's pieces start swarming toward the king's side. Queen takes h2, grabbing a pawn while the building burns down around it. Rook takes g7, tearing straight into Black's king cover. Knight takes b2, and that's the last straw. The king had to sprint to d8 to survive. Now, it's over. Rook takes f7. The evaluation just detonated. White is completely, totally winning. The black king is alone and surrounded. Queen to d6, a final flail with 7 seconds on the clock. Rook to a8, check, and here Shuvalova resigned. And right here, black saw the writing on the wall and resigned! But before I show you the finish, pause the video and find the forced mate in 2. Take all the time you need, I'll wait. Let's look at exactly what would have happened if they decided to play on. Black moves the queen to b8. White's queen takes on e6 with check. The king slides to d8. The rook captures on b8. There is absolutely nowhere left to run. It is a forced checkmate. What a roller coaster. The big lesson? A king stuck in the center is a liability that never goes away until it's safe. Both players paid for it at different moments. And that knight crash on c3 is the kind of move you should burn into your memory. When the opponent's king has no shelter, you blow the pawns off the board and pour pieces in. Grabbing pawns while behind in safety nearly cost the win twice over. Drop a comment. Did you spot the brilliant move before I called it? Smash subscribe, because there's plenty more chaos where this came from.